Looking for your best sleep ever? Sleep Number smart beds are literally made for you. They adapt to your changing needs. So whether you're dealing with sore muscles or running hot at night, your bed automatically adjusts for optimal comfort. Want softer, firmer, cooler, warmer? With personalized firmness settings and temperature control that cools up to 20 times faster than leading competitors, you'll get the perfect sleep environment every night. Why choose a Sleep Number smart bed? So you can choose your ideal comfort on either side. The only bed that lets you make each side firmer or softer whenever you like. Your Sleep Number setting. And now, it's the Sleep Number 4th of July sale. Save over $600 on the Sleep Number P5 King Smart Bed, the lowest price of the season. Limited time, exclusively at a Sleep Number store near you. See store or sleepnumber.com for details.
Craving your next action-packed adventure? Audible delivers thrills of every kind on your command, like Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, where a lone astronaut must save humanity from extinction, narrated with stunning intensity by Ray Porter. From electrifying suspense and daring quest to spine-tingling horror and romance in far-off realms, unleash your adventurous side with gripping titles that'll keep you guessing. Discover exclusive Audible originals, hotly anticipated new releases, and must-listen bestsellers that hook you from the first minute. Because Audible knows there's no greater thrill than the one that speaks to you. Discover what lies beyond the edge of your seat. Start your free 30-day trial at audible.com/WonderyUS. That's audible.com/WonderyUS.
From the All Indiana Podcast Network, it's Diversity Focus Today, a weekly discussion bringing awareness to cultural diversity in greater Indianapolis and surrounding areas. Now, here's your host, Rickie Solid Gold Clark.
And welcome to another edition of Diversity Focus Today, along with our team, Attorney Mike Murray, and the lovely and talented Tammy, or Dr. T. I got it. I'm using both names, Dr. T and Tammy Harris.
Yes.
Right, okay. This afternoon, this morning, or tonight, whatever time you're listening or watching to us, we have an exciting guest who I've known for so long we won't even talk about that. Because when I met him, I had hair. Okay? And I look over at Nate. Nate might have had hair, too, at the time. Attorney Nathaniel Lee is our guest on today's program. Welcome, Nate. How are you on this program?
Fantastic. Thanks for having me today, sir.
Good. We're going to be talking a lot about diversity, inclusion. Today we've got a pro, like I said, and one of the first questions, Nate, since you've been practicing for a lot of years, what have you seen and how have things changed in your line of work when it comes to diversity, inclusion? Tell us about that.
Well, that's a great question. In essence, when I started practicing law, for example, in Indiana, I knew most of the black lawyers throughout the state. Well, we made some substantial progress, and I can safely say now I probably don't know 75% of the lawyers because of the expanded growth. But why do we need the black lawyers? In our state, for example, and across the country, there is an underrepresentation of minority lawyers, and the net result is that most folks can't afford to pay for lawyers. And so you have to have this diversity, more diversity, and more lawyers to handle the needs of the typical citizen.
Okay. Well, that makes a lot of sense. So now, what do you think we need to do to improve the fact that we now have maybe more or less lawyers, say, in the state of Indiana and in other parts of the country?
Indiana, we've gone backwards in the sense that we had multiple law schools here in the state. You know, we had Valparaiso, we had one. Right now, we only have 3 law schools, Notre Dame, IU Indianapolis, and IU Bloomington. But we used to also have a law school in Valparaiso that was outstanding, produced a lot of great students and leaders. And then also they had temporarily a law school out of Fort Wayne. Well, when those 2 law schools closed, the number of candidates has dramatically decreased, and that led to a shortage. As we go forward, we had a higher incidence of death, for example, during COVID, right? And I know a lot of lawyers that just didn't make it through for various reasons. And so the net result is that we've not had the legal community in our state has not kept up with the growth of the population and the needs for legal services. And so as a result of the law school closing, I think it's resulted in a shortage of lawyers across our state.
Okay, Mike, I think you got a question for Nate.
Yeah, Nate. I spent most of my career on the corporate side, and so I spent a lot of time defending claims related to diversity. Why do you think that it's important from a business perspective to have diversity, inclusion, and diversity, equity, and inclusion? What's the business case for it?
The business case is that the businesses have the opportunity to get different ideas to solve problems of today. Whenever you are involved in a business enterprise now, our concept of artificial intelligence and the way technology is advancing requires that you have different thought process. For example, the world's top consulting company, the McKinsey Group, they never went away from their diversity and inclusion, and they're the top business experts on the planet. My son works for them, and they do the technology feature, right? Well, some of their biggest workers are in India, for example. And so when they're dealing with complex problems in America, they're getting people from different parts of the world to solve these problems. We need this type of infusion of talent in order to progress. What makes America an exception of this is that this country is a country of immigrants. And so our country historically has done better than other countries because we had diversity of thought process. And also, in terms of the economy, if you were to take the economy of the Atlanta metro area by itself and compare that to the total economy of Mississippi, Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, that one region has a greater gross domestic product than any of those states. And it's one of the most diverse areas in the country. And they have the world's busiest airport in the Atlanta's airport there. So the point is that from a business standpoint, you need the diversity of ideas, and you also need it to have growth in our country. If we're on a campaign now to rid the country, so-called, of immigrants. Well, here's the problem we have here locally. From the time I worked in the court system, one of the things I observed, for example, the city county building in the public places, who are the person that cleans all our bathrooms and stuff? And so our janitorial services in all the buildings I was in had people who were immigrants. They're from Mexico or South America, right?
Right.
And the reason being is that you're not going to find the typical citizen in Indianapolis willing to do that type of work for $10 an hour.
Yeah.
You can't live in the city on those wages, but the folks that are doing that work, they're working 2 or 3 jobs, right? Mm-hmm. And so who's going to do that type of work? Or, for example, roofing. I don't know whether or not you've had any roofing done, but each time that I've had roof work done, it wasn't people from white guys or black guys. It was Hispanic guys climbing on these tall roofs. Mm-hmm. It's hard work, and they do a great job, and the cost is a lot lower than the typical American company. So we need these folks to make our economy run correctly.
At all levels of the economy. We're not talking about just creating, an underclass of worker bees. That's what you're saying, right? We need people at all levels of the economy.
Yes, sir. And give you a good example. Let's look at education. Both my kids got a master's in business from Purdue University, right? When I went to the graduation ceremony, 80% of the students were foreigners that got advanced degrees at Purdue University.
Right.
When my son got his MBA, and there was only 2 black students to get MBA. Out of the class of about 80 or 90, about 75 were from China or Japan someplace. So we're losing these are highly skilled, talented students. They've had a great education. Purdue provided them great advancement to be able to solve the problems of the future. Well, we're losing the brain drain. Now, we're losing the ability to be the top country on the planet, because if we lose that diversity, we're not going to be better than everybody else.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that point up about the impact in higher education. I've been the general counsel for 2 higher education institutions in my career, and one of the things that I've noticed about the news headlines right now is that the assault on DEI, the assault on immigrants in education in the United States, both at the state level and at the federal level, there are plenty of indicators now, studies and anecdotal evidence that is showing that students are not choosing the United States as their source of higher education. So they're not coming here to get schooled in the American way. They are not bringing their ideas, their thought processes, their talents, their exposures here and incorporating that into our education, into our research. And if you think about it, back in World War II time frame, Albert Einstein, a nuclear physicist, was a foreigner. And so now what we're seeing is the impact in higher education and research is that people are not coming here and bringing that talent and that thought here. What do you think that portends for our future?
Well, it will reduce the aura of American exceptionalism. And before I get started on that thing, look what just happened recently. I thought was devastating. We American think of football as the NFL, college football.
Right.
The world think of football that we call soccer.
Right.
So the world's largest sporting event isn't American football, it's football, soccer, right? And so what just recently happened, because of these draconian processes dealing with immigrants, they decided to pull the world's largest sporting event out of the United States. I think that's devastating from a financial standpoint, because when you have these major sport events, look at the millions of dollars that we get. We get airline, we get hotels, we get food vendors, we get rent-a-car. The whole process bring in millions, if not billions of dollars into our national economy. But the idea that now America is hostile to foreigners is having a dramatic effect, I think, on the tourism process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
See, we don't live in a vacuum. We are an international country. We have people from all races, all countries. So when we started arresting people and stopping people just because they don't look like a typical American, whatever that is, then we've now frightened visitors from coming to the United States because they don't feel that they're welcome.
Right.
I would hate to be in the hotel industry when we have what we're experiencing now as a dramatic decline. Now, let's talk about, in particular, like some of the states. How does it affect some of the states? Well, look at the state of Florida. A month or so ago, I went down to Brayton and Sarasota area in Florida. Everywhere I went, I saw homes for sale. Okay. In that area, they got to have what tantamount to a depression in the real estate market, because the Canadian got pissed off and went back to Canada.
Right.
The people from Mexico, they're evicting. And so you have a big amount of inventory of homes. So your homes or your condos in that area is going to suffer a dramatic decrease.
Right.
And so when we start enacting these policies, it's imperative that we look at the total effect on the economy. And I think that eventually the state of Florida, they're going to have a collapse because you can't survive if you have that big of an effect on the real estate market.
Right. Indeed. And you're talking about, the business aspects of the crackdown on immigration and the crackdown on racial diversity. But from a geopolitical perspective, I mean, the United States is ceding its leadership role. People are not listening to what the United States is saying because of who's leading our country, because of some of the policies that we are enacting. And I think some of the European powers are really afraid of our process that allowed this to happen, more so or equally as much as who is occupying that, that chief executive role, but they're questioning the process that allowed somebody, not necessarily with that, of that political party, but with that policy, that thinking, to take office. So we are ceding American leadership in the world, which I think is going to have long-lasting implications.
Right. Okay.
Well, that's an accurate depiction, and the one of the worst thing that occurred that most people didn't notice, and historically, let's look at what happened in our country. In 2008, when President Bush was president, we had what was tantamount to frozen credit lines. So in 2008, United States almost went into a Great Depression because credit line froze up. So the political leaders got together and they had massive bailout for Goldman Sachs and all these money institutions that saved the American economy, right? And it led to the election of President Obama. But we saw the same thing happen back before the stock market crashed in 1929. Some idiot president came up with the idea to enact tariff laws, right? Mm-hmm. Back in the 20s. I mean, history. And so a lot of people thought that the Great Depression was caused by the introduction of tariffs, but everybody would uniformly agree that the tariff introduction led to the Great Depression being extended for a decade, right? Mm-hmm. So in our country, without approval of the House and the Senate, we saw a unilateral declaration of tariff wars in the United States. Right. And what most people don't know, for example, is that a company like Walmart, mm-hmm. I had the privilege of playing in a golf tournament for many years down in Bentonville, Arkansas. One of my friends was the number 3 person at Walmart, and way back in 2002, Walmart was purchasing $1 billion in goods from China every week. 1 billion, mm-hmm. 52 billion plus per year in 2002, mm-hmm. Walmart. Now, Walmart then, because they bought the goods so cheap, they were able to grow rapidly, became the top retailer on the planet because they were able to get the Chinese products for a fraction of the cost of manufacturing in America. Mm-hmm. And that's still true today because if you ever buy, before the tariff was introduced, if you were to buy, for example, golf clubs in China, I can get those golf clubs in China for $180. In America, they're $1,200.
Right.
and so the tariff introduction, in the United States, unilaterally caused a shrinkage in our stock market and our valuation. But thank God that stocks are coming back. But we've just had an unintended consequence of just a reckless policy, just without study or analysis, decide to introduce tariffs on all these countries, right, without any logical reason for doing so.
Well, I think it's probably an ego-driven reason, but, I have to ask the psychologist.
Definitely ego, and just that sense of attention, I believe, and mocking. I think he want to be like a dictator. I really do. I think his ideal person to be is Putin, somebody in authority that can just snap its fingers and make everybody jump. But I think he's realizing that there's a backlash. We do have a system that's democracy that unfortunately I think worked for someone by fair, got maybe, somebody called it fair, but he got voted in. And we just have to abide by that, in a sense of this is how the system works and this is who got in. I'm quite sure I think we should relook at criminal backgrounds. You can't work at McDonald's or get corporate jobs or do certain things and work in those positions. And now you have this president that's overall to make our life decisions. So I don't think that's fair. And that maybe need to, get looked at again. But it's just interesting enough to see how far far as from a mental health standpoint, it's holistic. It's like at one point people could turn off their TV and walk away and go on with their lives, but it's affecting our lives every day, whether you turn on the television or not. So I always try to tell clients and even my family and friends, just focus on the things you can control and what you can do to the amount you can do. We talked about voting. We talk about making phone calls. We talking about the protests. Some people have the urge to do certain things that give them power, and that's all I say to do. Give you something that gives you power to get control over what's going on in this world.
Yeah, I talked to someone yesterday, and she told me that she doesn't watch the news anymore because she doesn't want to hear what.
Right, but she's going to hear it elsewhere.
Name.
She's going to see it in the televisions on the store shelves or on the sidebar conversation at the bus stop,
right.
It's there, unfortunately. And then it has a ripple effect when you open your wallet to pay for something. You're going to wonder, well, where and how?
Right.
So how could you live with it, even if it's subliminally coming at you, is to really just be mindful and grounded on the things you can and cannot control. Even if it means turning off the television, that's true, but how do you deal with it and other effects? You just can't ignore it. That's the thing. You just can't. If we all ignore it, then nothing, I think, will get done or shift.
I agree. Let me turn back to you, Nate. You had said something about comparing today to 1929, and so I wanted to bring this idea back to your discussion, which is kind of history repeating itself. And so to talk about on the national political level, you made the comparison between the introduction of tariffs back then and its effect and the introduction of tariffs today and its effect. But on a geopolitical level, do you see any similarities between what's going on today and what went on in yesteryear compared to in terms of politics and war, and particularly I'm referencing the war in Ukraine and the appeasement of Vladimir Putin?
Well, that's a great question, but it's a lot of different components. Let's first talk about tariffs. For the benefit of our audience, contrary to what some people are saying, tariff is not a tax on China, Japan, a country. Tariffs are a tax on you.
Right.
So when Walmart,
open that wallet.
I didn't look because I've not been in Walmart golf tournament in many years, and so I've not kept up with them like I used to. But when the tariffs in China hit, now the good thing about pricing that Walmart got, it's incredibly cheap. And let me give you a good example, so you see how ridiculous their markups are. During the pandemic, because I was ordering massive amount of masks for different entities, I inadvertently got Walmart order of 100 million masks, right?
Oof.
And when the pandemic first started, I was watching the people over in China wearing masks. So that day I said, man, I ordered like 10,000 masks. They were cost $1,000. They were only 10 cents, right? Well, Walmart ordered 100 million of those 10 cents masks. They sold them for $1. I said, man, so if they put tariffs on a product like that of 50%, instead of paying $1, they pay $1.50. I mean, they pay 15 cents instead of 10 cents. And so they still make a substantial profit. But I noticed that on some of the goods, I think that the prices got a little bit higher over the years. And net result is that, so you put the 50% tariffs on, it become much higher, which would cause Walmart to alter its price structure. Like, for example, things I had personal knowledge of was sneakers, for example. A certain brand of high caliber tennis shoes or sneakers that you pay a lot of money for them, to manufacture those same product in China was $2.50 for shoes that we sold for $200, right? So I have personal knowledge because I worked with a business person that was furnishing those products. Well, now when you introduce tariffs, the price of that product going to go higher, but it's still going to be cheaper to manufacture product in China versus United States. For example, when we order golf gloves, a good example, the typical golf gloves I put on a tournament will cost you in the United States between $15 to $20, right, for a good glove. Well, we order those gloves from China and they cost $1.50, right? And so when they add the tariffs on this year, we'll probably pay $2, whatever it is, $2.25. But we're not buying them in the United States. We're going to try to buy them directly through a vendor in China. And so the same thing with golf balls. I can get a dozen golf balls in China. I used to get them for about $10, and I saw now they're up to $24. Well, United States, those same balls are retailing for $48.
Wow.
And so the point I'm making is that this international trade thing actually keep prices down in America because you have a competition in the global economy. And I think that's good. And I think that when we enact barriers for trade, that it will cause the resultant consequence is that it's going to increase inflation because everything's going to cost more.
Yeah. When you start messing with people's golf game, you're going to have a political
right, that's a
upheaval.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
I think this may have to be a kind of a part 2 because we've got so many other questions and we've got like 2 minutes to go for this show. So Nate, will you be able to hang around for another 15 minutes?
Sure.
Okay, so we got less than 2 minutes, crew. Tammy, anything to go to the order?
Not that I can order, but I did want to try to throw in there. I'm glad you got back. It was 2 weeks without you, so our sessions. So welcome back home.
No pressure.
Nice
Thank
to meet you too, Miss. I was meeting.
You wait. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Mike?
Well, a couple things happened this week. Governor Braun took over some of the appointments of IU trustees and put some folks out of their positions as trustees. He said that there was a political motive behind it. Silencing of conservative voices on campus was part of his reason for doing it. But that is another example of the injection of political control into higher education. The other thing was RFK Jr. Dismissed all of the vaccine panel members because he wanted to replace them with people who shared his political ideology, so the American people aren't getting unbiased, scientific-based information. They're getting ideology-based information about health and vaccines.
Okay. Well, this is gonna be a part 2 program, so we're gonna continue on, but we've got to close now and then start over again. So, Nate, if you need to get hold of Attorney Nathaniel Lee, his number, and we're gonna put it on the screen, is area code 317-631-5151. But like I said, this is part A. We're gonna go to part B in just a few moments, so stick around. This has been Diversity Focus today with your host, Rickie Clark, along with Dr. T and Mike Murray. And our guest has been Attorney Nathaniel Lee for part 1. Stand by for part 2. Thanks for watching.
This is Diversity Focus Today with Rickie Solid Gold Clark. Watch Sundays at 1:30 a.m. on Wish TV. Be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast and check out other great podcasts on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Online now at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.